So I would like to introduce everybody to John Snow, CEO and founder of the Snow Agency.
Hey everybody, excited to chat with you, Luca. It's been a wild ride together and look forward to continuing it here today.
Amen. It's a pleasure to be here. So I have a good amount of context, but I know the listeners need some context as well. So we're going to go way back. We're going to go back to 2017. The Snow Agency hasn't even started yet. Where were you at this point in your life? What made you look and turn towards marketing?
Yeah, so I think actually we probably have to throw it back to around 2013, 2014.
Okay, way back. iPhone 3.
So that's where I first got introduced to marketing. So
okay.
Throw it back to those days. I was actually a general dentist in the U.S. Air Force. I was stationed in Louisiana in the middle of nowhere. Had never done anything on social media outside of posting on Instagram for myself. At the time, ironically, my brother Dan Snow, who many of you may know, he was building these large social media properties back in the day. So @Rap is his Instagram page. The big publisher that everyone probably knows today is Rap TV. So he was building these large organic social media pages, and he had realized that a lot of these large pages, influencers, celebrities, athletes, publishers, they had millions of followers, but they weren't monetizing their pages. So he had the idea to build an affiliate marketing platform that essentially got a lot of these large organic social media pages on it. Then we could run ads, through our platform and onto those pages. So, I had all this time in the world, stationed in the middle of nowhere, had nothing to do in the middle of deep Louisiana, and figured why not, from 3 p.m. to midnight, start exploring what, social media marketing is all about. So got started really just to pass the time. Was really a hobby. It wasn't even lucrative, day one, but started getting really deep into it. And that's how essentially I got my foot in the door with digital. We grew that platform to 9 figures in revenue within the first 2 years of launching it. I was still obviously doing dentistry. I was still active duty in the Air Force, and then from there started leveraging that network to launch our own e-commerce brands. That's how we got into the whole e-commerce space.
Yeah. And it was particularly interesting at that time because I was in college with Dan when he was introducing this. And one of my bigger life regrets was not recognizing the amazing opportunity at hand and focus on the nuanced details of Ramapo College. All right. So you make the entrepreneurial leap, right? Med school be damned. You follow your heart. You start this business alongside with your brother, Dan. What was the threshold that you had to hit when you kind of in your head were 100% John Snow, the marketer, and no longer 100% Dr. John Snow?
Yeah. So honestly, I never envisioned on leaving dentistry. But once we started scaling our own e-commerce brands, we built essentially an e-commerce holding company. We had 9 brands in our portfolio at the time. 3 years later, after I'm done with the Air Force, I actually start my orthodontic residency. So I moved back to the Northeast. People think I'm crazy for even going back to residency, but I'm a man on a mission. And when I decide I want to do something, I do it. And it was my dream to become an orthodontist. So I had, embarked on a 3-year orthodontic residency program. And then those brands started scaling. September 2019, started taking on clients actually because we started developing a reputation that we knew what we were doing in the e-commerce world. We were driving all the traffic, doing all the conversion rate, doing all the website design and dev, all the influencer for all of our own brands. And brands wanted a little taste of what we were doing, but for their brands, that's how the agency was born, September 2019. And then I actually finished up my residency in the middle of 2020. Ironically, I was actually under contract to buy an orthodontic practice, and then COVID hit that week. So I was actually making a step towards going further in my dental career, and I was going to always juggle both careers simultaneously because I already had done it successfully for 7 straight years. Then pulled out of that deal. Obviously, everything shut down in New York City, and focused on the agency, and always planned on revisiting buying that practice again once things opened up. But after a few months of really just focusing on the agency full time, not having other distractions, the agency actually started growing tremendously during COVID. We all know what happened. E-commerce had a boom. Agencies had a boom. There's a huge need for digital marketing. So the agency really doubled in size over the next few months. By the time things opened back up in New York City, it really made no sense to actually go back. Digital marketing always felt like a video game for me. It was where my true passion lied. So I had a moment of introspection. Do I want to keep spreading myself thin? Which side do I think I can scale more? Which side am I most passionate about? And really e-commerce and digital is where kind of checked all the boxes. So I never went back, haven't treated a patient since 2020.
Except for when I would come into your office saying, John, do I need to get this checked out?
I'm still the family and friends dentist, that's for sure.
I remember that moment because it was such a big deal. You felt the tectonic shift at the agency because up until that moment, it was as if you were more so like a board member or advisor that was involved in everything, but it was always after hours meeting and it was always, what we could do in between patients. And the day you showed up, it was like, oh, things are happening here. And that was super exciting for everybody on board. So you decide to show up, and this question kind of goes a little bit before 2020, kind of when the agency is really kind of getting off the ground. Knowing how complex digital marketing really is and how nuanced every service can really be. As an agency, how do you determine which services to provide first and what made you expand to other services?
That's a great question. So when we launched the agency, we weren't even like purposely launching it. We were really an agency for our own brands that we owned. And by nature, we had scaled all of our own brands on the backs of Facebook ads, Google ads, and email marketing. So by nature, those were the services. Really, it started off with just Facebook and Google that we were offering as an agency. And then over time, we've expanded, obviously, all the service offerings to many others. And the reason why we really start with Facebook and Google is that's where obviously the biggest impact could be made, driving top of funnel traffic, driving users that are going to convert, and then figuring out how to optimize conversion on the website itself. And then over time, we expanded outwards to all the other services like a full-blown photo video studio, email SMS marketing, you name it, organic social media management, influencer. And really it was because we realized a lot of the success from our Facebook and Google ads really relied on the creative. It really relied on UGC. It really relied on obviously customer lifetime value and email and SMS flows and campaigns. And the less that we had to control within the whole user journey and performance of a brand, the less our success could be predictably achieved.
Yeah. And I think at that time too, there were certain clients that really kind of invested into us or really cared about our opinion, even if it was services that we had not provided. So for the clients that we had that really great relationship with, there was that notion of like, all right, we'll advise you on this. This is what we think we should do. We have partners that should explore this, but more and more you're referring to these other partners. You begin to ask yourself the question, like, should we just be doing this for them? Is that where we're at right now? Should we just launch this up? And lo and behold, the growth came along.
Exactly.
So in your time as an agency leader, we're talking, as you mentioned, 2013, 2014, but we'll call it 2017 to now. There have been some crazy swings that happened in the industry. COVID, iOS 14, economy shifts, political shifts, TikTok, MTA solutions are introduced, first party this, third party that. How do you survive these changes? How did you navigate all this? And if you could, what advice would you give to an agency owner that's going to undoubtedly face these fluctuations, as they go moving forward?
Yep. Yeah, we've had a wild roller coaster past like 4 years, essentially. But really comes down to just being calm. That's the first piece of advice I would give. Calm heads always prevail. The sky is not falling, even though it might be perceived that way from external perspective. Everyone relies on you to be that voice of reason and voice of calm that, it's okay, we're going to figure this out. There's some challenges here. Itemize these problems. Let's develop solutions. And then, test those hypotheses and make, once that hypothesis turns into a thesis, you roll it out across the larger, broad book of the clients. But, if there's a will, there's a way, essentially. So iOS 14, economy, if there's a will, there's a way. CAPI solutions came out, all these tentpole events happen, and then boom, there's a lot of solutions that follow. So it really comes down to being on top of what's available there, to solve any problem a brand or a business might be facing. So you really got to stay on top of all the industry trends, the industry shifts, the industry solutions. The last thing you want is your team or your client to ask you and you not have any answers. The second that happens, then your ability to perform and consult and guide brands and team members through these challenges, it really becomes diminished. So you got to think of yourself as a thought leader, always stay one step ahead of your clients, your team members, and just really comes down to consuming information, building a framework for yourself to understand where to, who in your network do you need to put in place so that you can constantly share insights. So I think we've been doing that really well. We've always kept great relationships with fellow agency owners. Some might think, oh, but they're competition. You can't look at it that way. This industry is big enough for everybody to win. The more allies you put in your corner, that means the more potential solutions that you can provide.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember one time we had this discussion, and it was like regarding in-house media buyers for brands, but also just kind of like philosophically what it means to be an agency. And you told me that there is no rule book that you carry throughout being an agency. Being an agency is responding to real-time problems. And that always stuck with me. That always landed. And when I speak with brands that have in-house marketers that have been maybe one or two individual marketers that have been going through their processes for years now, and they're saying that same old story, back in the day we were 10xing and now we're 2xing, Facebook's dead, this is dead. It really kind of brought light to those instances where it's just, you need to be ahead of the industry. And this industry is an industry that is being developed off of Facebook, off of TikTok, off of Google. So you need to respond to the ebb and flowing changes that are inevitably going to happen throughout this entire landscape. And I think that was key, particularly during those, iOS 14 time or COVID, before the positive change of COVID happened, at least in the sense of digital marketing. So now I do want to dive a little deeper into your infrastructure and ultimately kind of give our listeners an idea as to how to account for the bandwidth of a scaling agency. Like, I want to get into agency infrastructure itself. So let's start with a good marketer. What do you expect from a good marketer? How many accounts, do they take on? What skill sets are you hoping to have? When you're hiring a marketer, what's reasonably expected from an individual?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's probably the biggest question for any agency owner on what hats do certain team members wear? And we've been through all the models you can think of, but we were pretty early, I would say, when we made the decision a couple of years ago to really stray away from the term media buyer and call them holistic growth marketers.
Sure.
So obviously, as AI, machine learning models on these platforms, Performance Max, Advantage Plus Shopping, TikTok has one now too, SPC. Obviously, that leaves a lot of room for the marketer to be more dangerous outside of the ad account. So it's not just media buying, budget optimization. It's creative strategy. It's landing page strategy. It's understanding conversion rate optimization, e-commerce tech stack, market research, all the things that are done outside of the ad platform that will impact your performance in the ad platform are things that a marketer needs to own. I'm not saying every marketer needs to actually be doing, design and development and actual ad development, but they need to be able to understand what creative templates work and how to communicate that to a design team so they can bring those concepts to life. So our marketers are really wearing the hats of that landing page conceptor, creative strategist. They understand what types of technology a brand might need to improve average order value or conversion rate or customer lifetime value. They understand how to leverage post-purchase surveys and what types of questions they should be asking, every brand's consumers after the purchase. And they can use that to inform their creative strategy for the next round of creatives. So it's really that holistic growth marketer. That's how we position that.
Yeah. That I think a lot of marketers, they're intimidated by the notion of feeling like they need to be a graphic designer or an animator, or they need to be a website developer. But I think the strengths of working with an agency is that you have those specialists on hand. But that doesn't mean the specialist can just pick up and say, hey, make me creative that's going to work. There needs to be that strategist. There needs to be that marketer that's digesting the insights, that's looking at the data, that's leveraging Northbeam to really understand the nuanced details of the customers, of the user journeys, of the LTV, and conveying to that creative team how to make something that aligns with that. And when you have that chemistry in an agency, you're really cooking, and you could really generate some pretty crazy case studies, as you'll see on the Snow Agency website for sure. So next question, you look at the list of services that you do, and I try to put these in sequential order, and I'm sure there's more, but website to PR to content creation, organic social, paid media on multiple platforms, CRO, SEO, influencers, landing pages, Shopify integrations, creative strategies, analysis, A/B testing, conclusion, implementation. There's so much that a brand needs to do in order to be successful in this world. For a brand that is looking down the barrel of all that it takes to be successful, what kind of resources should they realistically expect to have a puncher's chance in actually doing all that needs to be done?
It's a great question. It really comes down to two factors. What budget do they have at their disposal? So ideal versus practical. Mm-hmm. And then also, what point in their life cycle are they of a brand? Are they, pre-revenue? Are they at 8 figures in revenue a year run rate? But I would say for a brand getting off the ground, really the bare essentials: have a Shopify website, product photography that's high level. You have to obviously go through a branding iteration, so you understand who your consumer is, do all that before getting your branding in place. So branding, website, creative. Then obviously you're going to need your app tech stack, Shopify apps. So like an upsell app. If you're a subscription brand or CPG brand, you need a subscription app. Then you also need post-purchase surveys and obviously a conversion API solution as well. And then for traffic, it really comes down to Facebook and Google. Those are the two main drivers. I would get into TikTok as kind of that third channel. Last thing you want is take a constrained budget and spread it thin across numerous platforms. So Facebook and Google are really those workhorses. So automated email flows, obviously, to capture and grow your first party data. I would say those are like the bare essentials.
Sure. So think of it, there's two types of way of brands sort of growing. There's sort of the organic way, where maybe a brand starts off in a retail location, they open up their own page, friends and family, they grow over a few years, they amass some resources, they introduce Facebook, they kind of trickled on their way up. And that story, we've seen it a bunch of times, and we know that a lot of great brands materialize out of that story. But there's a lot of variables that impact that growth journey. So imagine, and this is a really high softball question, we're not going to hold you to the penny, but imagine you were an entrepreneur that had an amazing idea that was exactly, you wanted to start a brand, you visualize yourself on Shark Tank, closing Mark Cuban, all of that, and you needed to get a VC to fund you. How much funding would you say a brand should kind of realistically have, and over what runway would you think would that funding have a realistic shot in identifying this product really does have maybe what it takes, or we've gave it a real shot and this isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very tricky question, I would say. Sure. A general answer to that would be a few $100,000 is the bare minimum you would need. Obviously, to get solid branding, I wouldn't, overspend on branding. I've actually seen that be done time and time again. A brand with less than a year of runway is spending half of their annual budget on branding and the website, and then they have no money left to actually go through, ad testing iterations over the next few months. So I'd say a few $100,000, and it really comes down to trying to get something that's decent MVP of a website and branding off the ground, get your basic tech stack, and then have the dollars to, maybe even run the marketing yourself. I would say if you have less than 6 to 12 months of runway, you probably should not hire anyone in-house, really, other than maybe a right-hand man internally. Last thing you need is a payroll to drag you down, because it's very rare that you're going to have contribution margin from your ad spend to pay off a fixed expense like payroll or even an agency. And that might be counterproductive to obviously my seat right here, since I'm an agency owner, but you really need to kind of model out what that runway looks like. You have to understand, and I've seen so many brands come in, they're pre-revenue, they don't even understand what their break-even metrics are. They haven't even run models on what, success actually looks like and what they need to be profitable. They don't even know what their blended cost of goods sold are. So like, how do you even inform a marketing strategy? And I guarantee you won't raise a dollar if you don't have those questions answered. But yeah, that would probably be a whole discussion for another day on how to prepare, what kind of models you need to run through to actually even raise money and what VCs will be looking out for. But a few $100,000 is the simple answer.
Yeah. It kind of brings up that old adage, it's expect the worst, but hope for the best. We've ran through instances where brands, they spun up and they started ads, October 1, and by the end of Black Friday, they made their first $500,000. And it's just this kind of like unrealistic success story. And those are definitely out there. But in terms of kind of managing your expectations, of course, you need that revenue to come back to you. And of course, we want that to happen right away. So we're not feeling like we're so leveraged on all of our investments. But also, the biggest tragedy that I think we've seen in this industry is when you have a good brand with a good founder that only has the runway for 2 months. And now they want to pull back. And now they don't give the ads a chance to engage. They don't give the audience a chance to mature. And we're seeing the click-through data. We're seeing the engagement data. We're seeing decent conversions. But, maybe we're just below profitability, but it's a consumable, or there's a high LTV for that product. It's always such a tragic thing to see an entrepreneur fold on their dream because they didn't adequately plan for what the actual launch would be. So yeah, that resonates a whole lot. So now back to kind of running a successful agency, the services that you provide and choosing the services that you provide. Of all of the services, what would you say are kind of like the hardest to deliver on? Like, more specifically, which services would you say these services should be the last services you launch as an agency, or at least in your experience, the ones that you had the most difficulty of from your initial expectations to what actually was required of it once you got it up and running?
Great question. I would say the hardest services to build an agency off of twofold.
Okay.
First one is services that are not retainer based. So one-time projects, it's almost like, you're always fighting for that next customer. If, you're, let's say, a website agency, you're finished with the website. If you don't have them on retainer afterwards, like a monthly maintenance package, then you're just searching for that next website design and development build, right? And if you have a payroll and you have staff that you have to pay every 2 weeks, but you don't have work for them to do, it's going to be very hard to scale an agency. So retainer-based services, that's what I would make sure you're focusing on. How can you take a potential one-time service, turn it into a retainer-based service? Second one is non-performance-based services, especially in an economy like we're in today. Everyone wants ROI, everyone wants profit. Those VCs want to see profitable growth, not just growth, right? And runway is a real issue. So I always say, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So I would say like a service that does not have a performance element to it, or if you're delivering a service that you're not showing the performance and kind of the value you're bringing to that brand, think about how you can position the service that you're delivering in the light of performance or value that the brand is actually deriving from your work.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. We have a little bit of time left, so I do want to shift towards the actual acquisition journey that had happened. And if you would spare a couple extra minutes over time, I'd love for that to happen. So at what point did you recognize that the agency was gaining interest in the market and, was even considered to potentially be acquired?
Yeah, we grew so fast for obviously like pretty much the first few years. I mean, we've only been around, actually, I think this is our 4-year anniversary this month now, in September 2019, September 2023. Yeah, 4-year anniversary. So, I mean, we started gaining quick traction. We grew to, over 100 people within, I think it was 2 years of launching. We started getting notoriety as we started, winning awards. 2022, we were Inc. 5000, number 2 fastest growing advertising and marketing company in the entire country. We were one of, I think it was 15 Shopify Plus partners in the entire US for digital marketing, among many other services that we're recognized for. We were Adweek's number 7 fastest growing agency in the country. So we started getting all these accolades. Obviously, PR goes out, press picks it up, the growth is realized, the name kind of started growing through all the different networks, and we started getting approached. Actually, we were getting approached within 2 years of even launching the agency, and weren't in the mindset to even consider that, especially if it wasn't the right partner. And then eventually we, got approached by Avenue Z, and it was, the perfect alignment where it was a 1 + 1 = 3. And it was an opportunity we couldn't pass up to really take us into that next leg of growth.
Yeah, I remember that Shopify Plus when we crossed that threshold and became a Shopify Plus partner. Shout out Jordan, shout out Beverly from Shopify. That was super huge for us.
Yep.
So now the acquisition is kind of on the table. You're faced with this choice, get acquired or continue on the path that we were on. What made you choose the acquisition route?
Yeah. Honestly, it was a no-brainer because of the partnership we were able to find with Avenue Z. So I would say that the hardest part that we hit was going from the size we were to the next phase and where we wanted to be. It was just me and Dan were really the only partners, and we were wearing all the hats of a business owner that really didn't contribute to the success of client campaigns. So operations, so like HR, legal, finance, recruiting, all these things that had to be done at a certain level of scale. It sucks up all your time, and then you can't be the one to really guide the company into the future. And you take a look at what's needed to really double in size, triple in size, double your client's performance, triple your client's performance, find new solutions, find new capabilities. And for us to do that and build what we knew had to be built, doing that internally, we simply didn't have the bandwidth to do it. And we didn't have, honestly, decades worth of experience to take us there and to really guide us predictably. So, that's all those boxes got checked off. Avenue Z, the founder and CEO of Avenue Z was the founder and CEO of one of the largest independent agencies back in the days when Google first became Google, iCrossing. And then there was, he did it again with Zog Digital, and he had these exits that were north of $500 million. And he had a leadership team that he had done it with many times over again. And they approached us with their vision of what a true digital marketing agency should look like, which incorporates and integrates PR, performance marketing, SEO, content marketing. And, PR, SEO, content marketing, those are three things that we were never going to be able to build internally. We weren't subject matter experts in those areas. And we knew that was part of a holistic strategy. And, we'd already been doing performance PR internally. So we knew the power of integrating PR with paid social. It's been able to take our clients, turn them into massive clients on the backs of performance PR. So we knew if we could actually have a dedicated PR team that knew how to execute on it and have done it time over time again, then it's a perfect recipe for success.
Yeah, that PR mountain, that is a huge thing to scale. To get into that, I mean, going from that D2C where everything is calculated down to the click, particularly if you're using Northbeam, and then jumping to that brand awareness, that exposure, things of that nature, that was a huge leap. And I saw the impact of that as soon as we got a chance to connect with those teams. So let's talk about sort of like what the process was like, when getting acquired. Like, how many suitors did you explore? And, ultimately the process of acquisition, what does that look like? If an agency right now who's listening is thinking they have a chance to get acquired today, what sort of nuggets of information would you give them to let them know, maybe the suitor is actually interested, what things to worry about? Is there any kind of insights you could provide in those regards?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is you definitely need to have your finances cleaned up. That's for sure. You're going to go through a very rigorous quality of earnings process, which will peel back every single layer. You have to make sure your contracts are, obviously fully executed and stored in a so it's organized. On the admin side, it's actually huge because when you're going through this type of process, which is months and months on end, if you don't have these things ready at your fingertips, then it's going to take you away from your day-to-day. It's a whole entire second job that you have to essentially take on as you're going through this process. So it's really getting all the contracts, legal, finance, that needs to be super buttoned up. Then you need to have a strong leadership team. The whole business can't rely on you. You need to empower the people, within your team. We've always had a very big culture from promoting within. So the people that Dan and I trained from day one when we were less than 20 people were most of the people that were now our leaders of the company. So they knew exactly how we like doing things. When we weren't looking, we weren't present. We knew to trust them, that they knew exactly how things should be done. So it's really building scalable processes, making sure that everything is, the engine is always able to stay on and it's revving at all times. So I would figure that out. If you're too involved in the business and you're, you're meddling too closely on, on the day to day, that's an opportunity for you to actually take a step back and start empowering other people on your team that you trust and that can execute on the highest level of quality.
Sure. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So you go through this rigorous process, you're analyzing multiple different suitors, you find one that you like, they're ripping your finances apart, they're understanding every little nuanced detail. Tell us about what it was like crossing that finish line. Suddenly you stick your head up and you find alignment, all the numbers are on the table. What does that feel like? What does that finish like? And then how does things change once that happens?
Yeah, it feels amazing. It's really, and it's not really just for the money. It's a moment of validation that
Amen.
You went through this rigorous process where they peeled over all your contracts, all your finances, can't find any issues. And they're actually excited to partner up with you, and they want you to stick around and be a part of that leadership team for the next big visionary agency. That really was just a moment of validation that everything we had been building and executing on for the past 4 years was, of utmost quality, or else someone wouldn't pay for it, right? And someone wouldn't include that as the foundation of the next big company they're building. And it was a moment of validation, not just for me and Dan, but also the rest of the leadership team, all of the team members. This was an acquisition where, it wasn't like got acquired and they're laying off droves of people to replace them with their own people, right? This is one where, everyone's part of that next vision, right? So it's not like we're engulfed by this big agency. Everyone just turns into a number and goes away. Everyone's impact is kind of lifting each other up at this point. So it was exciting for all the team members too.
Oh yeah. Blood, sweat, and tears is what made that happen.
Yep.
A whole lot of it.
Oh yeah.
All right. We're 4 minutes over. That includes the questionnaire. That includes the keynote. If anybody wants to learn more about this, connect with the Snow Agency, how do they get in touch with you? How do they explore your services? What can they do from you?
Yep. So if you want to get in touch with me, I'd say the best place, honestly, Twitter, LinkedIn. I try to always stay on top of industry trends, and sharing is everything. Knowledge sharing is probably my biggest core value. I'm an open book. So if you want to stay on top of everything that we're up to, everything that we're testing, give me a follow on LinkedIn, Jonathan Snow, obviously. And then on Twitter, I think it's at Dr. Jonathan Snow. Never going to drop that doctor for my name, even though I'm not a doctor anymore. But and at the Snow Agency, thesnowagency.com. You can even honestly email me directly, john@thesnowagency.com, JON@thesnowagency.com. Happy to kind of explore everything here. We're heading right into Q4. You have another month or so if you want us to actually activate you for Q4 to kind of get in our queue. So even if you just want to network and kind of ask me a few questions, I'm always more than open to, catching up, shooting the shit.
Sounds good. John, thank you so much for the time. I know you got a bunch of stuff going on, so I really appreciate both you and Diana joining this summit. We'd love to have you on future ones. To everybody that's been listening and that's listened to the whole day, thank you so much for your attention. I really hope that you got a lot of value out of all the speakers that we've had today. I don't believe that we're going to have a Q&A, so I do believe this concludes the summit. So we'll have another one next quarter. Best of luck to everybody in Q4 and Q5 if you subscribe to that like I do. And we'll see you around. Happy ROAS, happy scaling.
Thanks, Luca. It was a pleasure. Bye, everybody.
All the best.